Welcome to another episode of Talk to the Fedora, chatting about hard-hitting, honest entrepreneur wisdom that you can use to grow your small business. My name is Jared Goldsmith from eSAX Virtual Events, and today we're very pleased to be welcoming Meridith Grundei of Grundei Coaching. Meridith is on a mission to level up careers of others by making them effective, compelling, and engaging speakers who can connect with any audience. As an award-winning theater director, producer, and former Second City improv teacher, Meredith recognized the similarities between performing on stage every night and presenting to clients and colleagues every day. But the latter didn't have the right tools to bring their stories to life. So, of course, she decided to do something about it. Skip ahead many years and many reincarnations later, Grundei Coaching has helped thousands of individuals and organizations around the world achieve career growth and success. Meredith specializes in presentation and public speaking consultation, individual training and development, and creative team solutions using improvisational theater techniques to build trust, empathy, and out-of-the-box thinking. Meredith, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me. It's always lovely to hear your bio read back from somebody else.
Wow, was that me? Did I do all that stuff? Yeah.
Well, yeah, and you're like, oh, wow. And then you're also, I should add some things or detract or take some things. It's a whole thing. So that was lovely. Thank you for that.
Oh, thank you, Meredith. Meredith, let's start off. Where are you calling in from, please?
I am in New York City. I'm in Manhattan.
Excellent. And must have been busy every time there's a New Year's Eve party around there.
Well, I stay away from that. This year, though, I had a client who came into town to visit, so I did take her and her friend around, and we did a 3-hour shotgun tour of New York City, which included walking through Times Square. And if you have not visited New York during that time period, the holiday season, it is what you would think it is. It's just wall to wall, shoulder to shoulder people. So that was a little claustrophobic. I did that thing, and a lot of the locals are like, "You did what?"
Excellent. Meredith, let's start a little bit about your background. We got a little bit of an intro from your bio, but who is Meredith? Who is she all about?
Well, thank you for that question. I'm going to just start. I'll give you the Cliff Note version of who I am and help you understand how I got to where I am today. So I was always a pretty shy kid. Like I had a big personality, but I was shy, and I would often be that kid that sat in the back row because I didn't want to be called upon. I was terrified of answering the question wrong or not having the answer and sounding and looking stupid. And it was a friend of mine who invited me to take a dance class that I got on a stage. I started dancing. I started to build some confidence in that area. And then I had a dance instructor during a performance invite all of us to say one line of text on stage. And my line, and I was around 14 years old at the time, was, "When I grow up, I want to be just like Wonder Woman." And I did this like double or triple turn or something and landed with my arms like Wonder Woman would when she holds up her fists to stop the bullets. And this woman in the audience, who was another dance instructor, said that I should look into taking acting classes because I had a lovely stage voice and a stage presence. And that had never dawned on me. And so, of course, I went home to mom and dad and I said, "Would you pay for acting classes?" And they said, "Well, look at her. She has an interest. Yes, and we will." And so I took acting classes and, of course, got the bug, loved the community of people that are attracted to the arts, and continued acting, mostly on stages, mostly in theater, all throughout high school, college, you name it, and then moved to San Francisco, studied theater, performed on several stages in San Francisco, and then I had this sketch comedy member on our sketch comedy group. His name's Ryan Goland, and our sketch comedy group was Old Man McGinty. And he was like, "I'm going to hightail it to Chicago. I'm going to go study improv." And I was like, "Oh, I want to study improv."
Yeah.
So I was married at the time, and I said, "We're moving to Chicago." And my husband at the time was also an actor. So he was like, "Great, let's do it." So we did. And I interned my way through IO in Chicago, which was located at the time next to Wrigley Field. And was teaching after school programs, and a core faculty member was also teaching this after school program with me. And she's like, hey, we're starting this children's program, this kids youth program at the Second City. Would you come help us develop the curriculum for that and be one of our teachers? And I was like, yeah. So I hopped on the Second City bandwagon and ended up teaching the very first improv class for kids. And I'm pretty sure they were like 6 years old, and it was like herding cats. And we pretended to put groceries into, grocery carts and walk through mud and, spacewalks and all this fun kind of stuff that you do with that age group, and adults, I will say, because adults can learn how to play as well. And then one thing led to the next. Started teaching adult classes there, and then taught a couple of their biz code classes, which I know is now named something differently these days. And I got into some of these corporate rooms and taught improv to these teams. And I've always been fascinated with corporate America because I've only lived in it for 2 years. Like I had a short-term temp job for 2 years in corporate America. That was my taste of it. But I was always fascinated by what people did for work and how they did it and how teams organized. And so when I got into that room and I got to teach improv as a team building tool for people, I was like, I love this. This is what I love. And then I would get assignments to go help this C-suite over here with their public speaking skills, or they had a conference that they needed to give a talk at, or this person over here. And I loved it. And I was simultaneously still doing a lot of theater, and I started dabbling into directing. And one thing led to the next. And for a while, it was supplemental income. I would get called by executives, executive coaches, or I'd get called by other organizations that needed consultants. And I loved it. And I continued doing my acting. I continued doing my directing. I moved to Colorado. I got my master's degree in theater. And then I moved to New York City about 4.5 years ago. And the pandemic hit. And I, like everything that shut down, the arts had a really hard time. So I knew I wasn't going to survive off of Zoom readings and Zoom plays.
Yeah.
So I started my business, and I made it an LLC, and I went all in, and I
So
love
many
it.
times, Meredith, people, they have a great product or service, but they don't realize the value of expressing themselves
Yes.
to bring others on board.
Mm-hmm. 100%. It's, I think it's hard for people. I think it's really difficult, especially when you're working in these cultures where kind of everyone does things the way that the last person did it.
Yeah.
And it's not at anyone's fault. It's just that it's like in the name of professionalism, and I'm doing air quotes. And what I love about my job is giving people permission to play, to have a full body experience. And what I mean by that is really feeling the floor beneath your feet, engaging your body in ways that, because a lot of our communication is nonverbal,
Yeah.
in a way that's going to better tell your story, better tell give your presentation in a more compelling way, and how to use your voice, how to tell stories. A lot of people think they're telling a story, and they're not telling a story. Actually, they're telling either somebody else's story, or they're starting to tell a story, but it's the way we tell a story that really hooks our audience and gets them to lean in. And I love it. I love the work. I love giving permission to people to really get that mind, body, heart connection.
Meredith, who would resonate the most with your story? Now that you've branched out and you're reaching more of the corporate side, let's talk about
Who
who your ideal attendees would be.
It's interesting. The people I predominantly work with are in tech and medical.
Yeah.
And a lot of the presentations that are being asked of them, it's either they're presenting a new product, so it's heavy in architecture and data, or they're talking about a new drug that they're rolling out, if you're a doctor, or a procedure, and it becomes very didactic. And so I am really helping people connect the emotion to what they're doing. Like, for example, when you're rolling out a new product, right? Let's just say you're a software developer and you have to present this to customers or internally. you are actually helping solve somebody's pain point. And we need to hear that. We need that emotional connect. Yes, all of the architecture, all of the intricacies of that presentation are important, right? But we need to know why it's important. And a great example, go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry, Meredith. The the whole idea of COVID. You brought up COVID quickly
Yeah.
before. How people might be losing that face to face, that in person
Mm,
connectivity, and especially when I think of people who might need to get out there, like software developers, engineers, architects, who are accountants, perhaps who are more comfortable behind the scenes, but they need to go and engage others. It's such an important point.
yeah, it really is. And it helps them with their career growth. It helps them,
Mhm.
I do work with a lot of entrepreneurs, solopreneurs, if you will, who like in some of those fields that you just mentioned, maybe they're independent contractors
Right.
or they're accountants or they still need to be anymore with the TikToks and the LinkedIns and the video and the YouTubes. You have to be out there to be found. And so I help you feel confident in being found and how to be found.
Right. We talked a bit about your origin story, although we could probably talk a lot more about that soon. But when you went on your own, Meredith, did you already have a background in entrepreneurship or business, or how did you learn those skills?
Well, I had a father who was an entrepreneur. And he was in the financial industry, but he always had a side thing. He owned a lawn, like a dry cleaner for a while.
Mhm.
He owned a virtual reality place for a while. He was just into a lot. He had his hands in a lot of different things. So he, I would say, was my role model. And also, I feel though it's not taught to a lot of performers, performers already automatically have an entrepreneurial spirit. You have to know how to take risk. You have to know how to get in front of people that make you uncomfortable. You have to constantly be putting yourself out there, putting yourself on camera, putting yourself on uh, photography, taking photos of yourself, print work. You have to constantly be doing those things.
The important thing about you mentioned was for artists, we're used to it. I'm an artist myself as a
Mhm.
musician, but I'm the first one to say, maybe you could agree with me or not, musicians, artists in general, are terrible business people because they don't realize the entrepreneurial side. And how do people learn those types of skills? They might be really talented, the best theater director in the world, but is that enough to treat it as a business?
You're correct that most people are terrible at treating their profession as a business, and it's sadly not taught in a lot of schools. I've had the honor of teaching acting as a business, so
Oh,
um, I feel like what people the first thing I feel that everyone, no matter who you are and what you're trying to start, it starts with mindset.
mhm.
It starts with this "I can do" attitude and a healthy dose of curiosity. So that means looking for help, asking for help, reading books, seeing what other people have done, um, being a constant sponge when it comes to entrepreneurship. And I can't stress that enough and never stop that because things are constantly changing and shifting. As we're seeing with AI now, everyone's freaking out, but it's like, okay, but this is not going away. You can resist it or you can be curious and help move yourself forward in your business and in life. And
Mm.
so I would say it's the hardest part is asking questions, and then it's also being okay with rejection and really building those muscles and keep doing it again and doing it again and doing it again until you are comfortable with whatever it is that goal is. And I also feel like setting goals is incredibly important. Knowing your financial goals is really important,
Mhm.
not ignoring that. Giving yourself financial literacy is the best gift you can give yourself as an entrepreneur. And I will also put emphasize as a woman entrepreneur, it's important. Uh, so I hope that answered some of your questions, or
Oh,
if you have
sure.
any other,
Yeah, well, since we talked about money, cash flow, do you have any tips for people, for small businesses or people considering starting out?
pay attention to it. Pay attention to it. That is something that I've struggled with. I had to learn how to pay attention to my finances. And it can be fun and it can be liberating. And when you pay attention to your finances and you are in a place where you feel stable, confident, not in scarcity, that's when you can start to truly give back to the world.
Mm-hmm.
Some people feel that, and I see where it comes from, but that guilt of having and others who don't have, but you can't give to others if you don't have.
Yeah,
So
like being
mindset.
aware of it. Yes, absolutely. And this brings up another point, the concept of collaboration. You mentioned, being curious, be a sponge, learn as much as you can. And how important is the concept of collaboration for you? And how would that apply to the small businesses watching today?
Oh, good God, I'd be dead without collaboration. Like it feeds my soul. And it's funny because my husband and I were talking the other day about meditation, and meditation, you hear it every day. You should meditate. You should meditate. And I'm one of those people that's like, yes, I even went to a school where we started every day in meditation, but I was in meditation with community. So it was something that was fueling me on several different levels. What was my point there? I went off on a meditation tangent.
Oh, just the
It,
collaboration aspect.
so it's finding collaboration. I feel is incredibly important, even if it's you putting together a small group of 3 people and having a mastermind,
Mhm.
or finding a networking group that you can be a part of, or attending that event that you're kind of curious about, but you're feeling a little bit uncomfortable about doing because you have a hard time speaking one-on-one with people at those things, and you don't know how to balance the drink and the plate and the napkin and business card and all the things at the same time. All those are the places where I say you need to step in, because when you start to form those collaborations in that community, that's when your business will truly start to grow. When
Right.
you stay isolated, it's going to be very difficult for your business to grow.
Sure. And you brought up a few points about the networking side. I mean, I remember hearing a stat years ago that more people are afraid of public speaking than death. Uh, now, and talking about networking, people for the most part are intimidated. I don't think they really get out of their shell until they actively work towards it. But do you have any networking tips that you might share?
Yes. First off, everyone's uncomfortable in networking. There's very few people I have met who are like, I get off on this. Like I can name 2 right now. Um, For the rest of us, including myself, it is uncomfortable. There's an entrance point that feels awkward. That's why a lot of us walk over to the bar first thing, right? Because we feel safe and secure and we can hug the bar and order our drink or our soda or whatever. Um, is to start with a point when you meet someone one-on-one, it's about the question that you first ask. So you can start with a closed-ended question. How are you? Great weather outside, the things that we've all heard, or how about that game last night? Uh, or you can start from a place of more curiosity, an open-ended question that's going to make them think, right? So, for example, I could say, "Hey, Jared, what's the one thing you've done so far this morning that brought you joy?"
Besides interviewing you, I'd have to think about it.
Right? So you're going to think about it, and then hopefully you're going to give me an answer, and then I can say, "Oh, you had a podcast interview this morning. Tell me about your podcast." Right? So you've just learned something about that person. Now you get to pull on that thread a little bit more and continue to ask them questions. Now, if they're a person that doesn't really have a whole lot to say, then you can continue, just have a few of these open-ended questions in your back pocket. You could ask them, have you been to this networking event before? And if so, what's the one thing that you've gained from it?
Yeah,
Or
that's one of my favorite questions to ask.
right? So really being intentional, I think, is really important. So that means before you get there, how are you going to set yourself up for success? And then when you leave that networking event, how are you going to set yourself up for success? This is also entrepreneurial mindset. Here I am, the speech
Yeah.
coach, which is how many of these people here am I going to get on my calendar so we can have a further conversation? So if your target number is 3, then get 3 people on your calendar for that target so that you can expand that conversation with them. And I also I don't recommend people pitching each other at these things. It's about developing, and some people might debate me on this, and that's fine. Let's have a healthy debate. But it's about cultivating those relationships.
Yeah, it's all about relationships. I mean, we have hundreds of videos talking about networking, and actually, you can make that 3 people now. I also love networking. I get energized attending
Yeah.
networking events. But let's talk about the branding tips. Let's say, as a theater major, a production artist, how do people brand themselves, and why is it important, Meredith?
Oh my goodness, it's so important to have a personal brand anymore. Even if you're working for an organization, I think it's important because you want to stand out. You want people to get to know you. You want people to be curious about who you are. Here's the thing, not everyone's going to agree with me on this one either, and that's totally fine. I get new brand photos done every year. I learned that from being an actor. Why? Because you change. Every
Hmm.
year you change. Your business changes, your persona changes. Just little things. We're aging. We're not staying the same age. You know, we've gained new wisdom, new insights. That all shows up in a photo. So it's really important, to get your branding. It's important to be paying attention to your website, for example, keeping that updated, making sure that you're contributing to it if you have a blog on there, making sure that your privacy policies are updated, making sure it's compliant with all the things.
Yeah,
So branding is important. Knowing what your call to action is important. That could shift. Knowing what your value adds are is so important. Making sure that you get I'm doing elevator pitch, that word, but that pitch, like how do you enter into a conversation in some of these networking events where they ask you first thing, what's your pitch? Have that memorized so that when it comes out, it sounds natural and it doesn't sound like you're searching for the words or that you're a newbie at this, but you're confident, you know how to communicate it, you've got a smile on your face. So all those things need to be constantly practiced and retweaked. And I feel like things are constantly moving to having that beginner's mindset and an
right.
improvisational mindset, and knowing that this isn't always going to be the same way is super important.
Yeah, what you said earlier about not making things a sales pitch. Like, yeah, people might say, "Oh, great, I go to this networking event. I'm going to get sold. I don't like it." One of my favorite tips is asking a lot of questions,
Yeah.
and that like
Yeah.
open-ended questions, like you said.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's okay if things don't work. Like you have to put, like, that's the one thing I've learned too. You cannot wait for perfect. And I
Yeah,
know people have heard this before, your listeners have heard this before, but it's so true. You just have to launch. You have to put yourself out there, and you will get the feedback about what's not working if
mhm,
you're listening.
yeah.
So,
What about processes, Meredith? Has anything changed because of COVID?
oh yeah, I my whole yes. I mean, I
And
meet so
how
many
has that
people
affected?
now.
How is COVID? Well, there's no question about how it's decimated the event industry or the artist industry. But how do you think that's changed for how people approach the arts, at least in your experience?
How people approach the arts.
Yeah, like if you're a professional artist in whatever discipline,
Mhm.
what have people done during COVID?
It's interesting. That's a good question. I feel that on some level, it's helped the arts become more accessible to people, meaning more affordable, because the arts can tend to be expensive, which alienates a lot of people from being able to participate in the arts. I feel that because of COVID, because of George Floyd as well, and all the events that have happened during the pandemic, that there is a greater awareness about inclusivity, which is really important. And it's shifting the landscape of how we are doing theater, how the arts is being approached, and what voices need to be heard that haven't been being heard is really an important and needed cultural shift.
Right?
Um, I feel that there's options now for me. For example, I'm still a part of a company in Boulder that's located, their hub is in Boulder, Colorado, but they have stuff going on in LA and here in New York. is that I can now, because of the live stream, because that wasn't really a thing before, we weren't thinking in that way. I can now see the show, though it's different live. We all know that, but I can see that show now virtually. I directed a show last year in Mexico, in central Mexico. My friend Eli Hans did his one-man show. I directed it. He's now able to reach a larger audience. Yes, he did it live there in San Miguel, but he now has this beautiful recording of it. He can now show that to multitudes of people and use that footage to help tell his story and save lives. So I think that has had a fundamental, and that's true for a lot of different disciplines, not just theater, is that your art gets seen by more people now.
Right. Oh yeah, and using social media even more perhaps than before.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So those are some of the ways. I'm not sure. So I'm curious about that same question for you in the music industry and how you've seen that shift things.
Well, I know, well, for me, I've known a lot of musicians who found another job during COVID because there's no
Yeah.
playing. And for
Yeah.
me, I always, well, it's a passion. I've been playing for 35 years. But when COVID hit, I realized the future was not the music side. So I pivoted to hosting virtual events, which is an easy change for me. I still book other players, but I'm not playing myself anymore.
Yeah.
So I had to adapt, or I wouldn't have been in business anymore.
So let me ask you this question, because I feel like we can have a little conversation around this. How do you feel about that not playing as much as you used to?
Surprisingly, I don't miss it that much. It got to the point where I used to practice so much in university, I got tired of it. It was a job.
Yeah.
And when I went full time in 2011, the thrill of it, and to me, the concept of being an entrepreneur and treating it like a business, which set me aside from a lot of the other artists,
Mm-hmm.
and my in person events with eSAX, as an event planner and musician, I had no choice. I was dead in the water when COVID hit. And the day COVID hit, I came across this platform and I've changed my business. Anyways, we could talk more about me, but I'm here to interview you.
Oh, but I want to know about you too, Jared. So do our listeners. Come on.
But I think if people don't adapt, then expecting the same thing to change, it's not going to happen unless they make an effort.
Yeah.
And for people like in the arts, what did we do during COVID? Yeah, I mean, if you write music, you teach, great, you'll still have some work. I never taught. I don't teach myself, so my
Mm.
options were even more limited than most.
I teach the sad part about the arts is they're so sadly underfunded.
Yeah,
So I could teach, but I would not have made enough money to survive. And
right.
that's the issue. And uh, it's interesting the perception of reality that people have around artists. Like if you've made it to Broadway, yeah, that's amazing. Like those are the best stages to be on.
Yeah,
Those actors are still hustling,
yeah,
right? That show closes, they're hustling. You get a series regular, and that series doesn't go on to season 2 or 3, you're back to hustling.
yeah,
So you're constantly like it's not difficult. It's difficult, yes, to get in the rooms, but the difficult part is maintaining that lifestyle to where you can feed yourself and have health care. And I know
oh,
you're Canadian, I'm in the US, so it's a little bit different there, but it's a thing. So
I think one thing
entrepreneurial
with advice,
spirit.
Meredith, is anybody who's starting up a business or been in business for a few years, never take it for granted. You don't know if there's going to be another pandemic or whatnot. And maybe your industry is going to have a radical shift. Always be hungry. Always
Yes.
think and be engaged and find out what's the most current technology, perhaps, that you could adapt.
Yep,
Give you a bit of an edge.
100%. 100%. Always be curious. And I can understand where resistance comes from. I get it. Like there's always resistance, but
Yeah,
I feel like I don't know. I feel like what the spirit I've always had in me is I've always been a little bit non-conventional. I've always been the one that gets kind of excited about the new thing, this new shiny object, and I always have kind of a non-conventional approach to getting my needs met.
yeah. Well, as long as it works, that's all that matters. Let's talk about a bit of
Sometimes
coaching or mentorship. Meredith, did you have a coach or a mentor when you decided to go full time in the theater world?
I do. So full time in the theater world, God, I feel like that just kind of it's just so funny. It's like that. I had the mindset this is the only thing I'm going to do. So that I
Right.
don't know if I had a mentorship wasn't really on my mind when I was first getting into theater because I was very young. I will say a huge influence of mine was a woman is a woman named Barbara Dilley, who I met in graduate school, and she used to dance with Merce Cunningham and Judson Church and a lot of the postmodern kind of dance movement here in New York City back in the day. And she was an inspiration to me and a mentor because she is the one who I feel like I heard the most when it came to slowing down and listening to the wisdom of your body
Hmm.
and how we see things. We did this eye practice. It's just some of the work that we did, improvisational work and meditation work, was really quite profound for me. And there was this question I always had as an artist who also worked in the business world, is the question, and this is the question she arose in me, is how do I translate? How do I translate what I do as an artist into the business world to where people can hear it? Because a lot of times what happens is we come from one discipline and we put upon that discipline in another arena that's not used to that way of doing things, and it can turn people off. It can actually scare people away. So my question I always hold is, how can I translate this so that it's more accessible, so that people can feel included? So that's the person I would say has really been a profound mentor for me.
Yeah, yeah, that's so important. I think a lot of
Mhm.
people, they go into whatever discipline as a small business owner, and artists are small business owners. We've already
Yes.
talked about that.
Yeah.
And they think they could take on the world. They could do it all themselves. But it's a lot more than just themselves. Realizing
Yeah.
that we talked about the collaboration and the need to understand so many different parts of the business that they might not have other thought. They think, oh, I just want to dance and get on a Broadway or a tour or something. Yeah, but to get there, it's quite a process.
It is a process. Everything well, and we always hear it's not a sprint, it's a marathon, but it's like that's so true. It's a slow walk. It's a slow walk.
It's a little
And
strut until we
it's
get there.
it's yeah, and I sometimes joke because this was a thing that I did in grad school as well as a movement practice, but we do this thing called the slow 10, where you move from one part of the studio to the next, very slow and meditative. And it is like you're feeling every single almost cell in your body and muscle and that
Yeah.
foot, the heel to the ball of the foot. And I feel like it really brings up your awareness of your own body and your own journey in that short period of time. And I would say that's true for being an entrepreneur, is just be here now. Take the small step towards the next step and then the next step. And and trust is, I can't emphasize the word trust more. If you trust that, you are going to succeed. But if you stop trusting it and you go to scarcity or you're back to your old habits again, it's going to be really hard to
You mean
continue
like
growing that
trusting
business.
your own self, or like your own thought process, like or others?
I think it's trusting you, it's trusting your your process, and it's if you don't trust the people in your community, or you've got people who are pulling you down and have too much of an I can't attitude, or you need to kind of find a new community of people
Yeah.
that are going to lift you up and pull you up, and you do the same to them as well, because
Oh, it's the confidence angle too. Like,
yeah.
yeah, as an entrepreneur, not everybody's going to get it. Some of us might have, people might have government jobs. They have the pension. They don't have to work hard. Well, as hard as you might have to as an entrepreneur, a small business owner. And yeah, I think we've all realized it at some point. It's the
Mhm.
people you associate with, like, oh, you're crazy. We're not going to buy from you because your prices are too high or whatever. Yeah, but it's your passion, and finding your, what do they call it? The tribe, like people who want to support you and bring you up.
Mhm.
It comes back to that collaboration angle.
Oh my goodness, and I have found some phenomenal humans during this pandemic. I mean, that's that I just like Sumana Jetty is now a dear friend who I've known for 2.5 years now. We met on Clubhouse. We're now have organized the Workplace Wellness Collective, where I'm a presentation specialist for the group and I help her organize, but
Right.
she's a wellness expert. She's helping people prevent burnout within their organizations and giving them the tools to do that and leadership to do that. We get to meet for the very first time in San Francisco at the end of the month. We're going to have a retreat. We're having and we've been lifting each other up this whole entire pandemic, and we've never met.
Like, that's it's a long lost friend.
I know, it's amazing. So those kind of people, like, and she feeds me because she's so positive, right? Nicole North is another person that I met, and both of them are Canadians. I'm attracted to all of you Canadians, Jared.
Meredith, maybe we'll have to have you back and talk about how that session went. Let's talk a bit about time management.
Yes.
What does it mean to you, please? And as it relates to small businesses?
I am such an improviser. I have tried really, really hard to do Pomodors. Is that what they're called? Every 20 minutes, you work on only one task. So I might be the worst person to ask that question to right now. What I will say is this: there are tools that have kept me moving forward. I have rules for myself. And when I have rules for myself, which is a structure, much like improv, you have to have a structure. It's not just all made up on the spot. There's still a structure there that guides you. My structure is this: I show up on time. I use Calendly, which is a wonderful scheduling tool for me. I have 30 minutes on LinkedIn in the morning, 30 minutes on LinkedIn at night. I'm clear about how many people I'm going to engage with, right? I get clear about what I want my quantifiable results to be. So those are my guiding principles, rather than I'm going to work on this for 30 minutes and then work on this for 30 minutes and then work on this for 30 minutes. I've found a way to where I accomplish more in a day because of my own rhythm. And then I might write in my gratitude journal right after this podcast, Jared. I might go for a walk later in the day. I drink water all day long, and I try to drink a glass of it before coffee because I hear that does things for your cortisol levels. So I do things, but it's not as regimented as a lot of business owners do them. So
but having those pre-made options, like half an hour LinkedIn in the morning and then evening going for a walk, doesn't it help you become more accountable? You find that there is progress week to week.
It does help me be more accountable. And I also have, because I'm an extrovert, I have amazing accountability buddies too, right? Mm-hmm. So when you get that's the other, just tying it back to collaboration and community, when you take a risk and it may feel uncomfortable, but you put yourself out there and you get yourself an accountability buddy, or you get into a networking group and you say, I'm going to have my forecast for the year there, and I'm going to give you my each quarterly forecast and what my goals are. And other people know it, and they know what your numbers are, which is scary, but you're held accountable now to yourself because there's some eyeballs on that.
Yeah. People ask me why I work so hard over the years, because my musicians, they're all contractors. Even the people I hire for my virtual events, they're just contractors. If I'm not hustling the business, no one is. And
no one
so
gets
I always
work. Yeah.
The process, it's on me. And the reason I work so hard, Meredith, I want to be in business in 4 years from now.
Yep.
That's it.
Yep. I want to be in business. I want to spend more time with my family.
Yeah.
Right. So the more my business grows, the more my goal is spend more time with my family, spend more time on the things that I love doing. And not to get me wrong, I love working on my business. I have tremendous joy in it. Yeah. And I love my family.
Well, two things come to mind. One is when I talk to new entrepreneurs, I ask them all the time, why do you want to become an entrepreneur? Maybe 30, 40% says, I want the 4-day weekend. So I chuckle to myself and said, it's going to take a while to get there. And two, you mentioned a really important point, working on the business. For those who are new to the entrepreneur world, there's a big difference between working in the business and working on the business.
Yeah.
Yeah. Really important.
Go ahead.
Oh, sorry, Meredith, please go ahead.
No, I'm good.
We only have a few more minutes, so let's talk about some of the successes you're most proud of.
Okay, so I have successes that I'm proud of. Okay, this last year in 2022, I wrote a one-woman show and performed it. I got a residency here in New York City, and for 6 weeks, which is amazing for an artist, and was able to produce and perform my one-woman show and have it recorded. I had a 3-camera shoot and had some publicity shots of it. Yeah. And it was inspired by the death of my father. And it it deals with themes of generational trauma, PTSD, mental illness, and I did it in a not a first person point of view, but a third person point of view, and that was a huge achievement for me. So that's, to hold the space for 1 hour in front of an audience and tell a story is very hard. So that, and then I doubled my business this last year, and that was
Fantastic.
incredible.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm just so excited. I have new things on the horizon in terms of that show. Maybe it might become a podcast. We'll see. I'm not going to say too much more about that until those balls get rolling.
But doubling the business during COVID, that's phenomenal.
Doubled my
Congratulations.
business last year. It was fantastic, and I'm going to double it again this year. That's my goal.
You do it. And
I will.
the other side, Meredith, is the challenges, the failures, work-life balance. Like, what were some of the lessons you've learned? Some of the challenges that you faced?
I feel like the biggest transition or challenge I have faced is this question of identity. I feel what happens is that we get so wrapped up in the identity of how we think people see us or how we've seen ourselves for so long. So whether that means you've worked in corporate America for a really long time and that's been your identity and your kind of safety space for a long time. For me, I was used to hustling as an actor. I was used to being that person who was the director, the actor, doing the occasional voiceover, doing this, that. The transition from that identity into being an entrepreneur and business owner was hard for me. So I am still doing performance every once in a while, but not at the level in which I was doing it. So that was an interesting transition. There was a little of imposter syndrome that was living on both sides while I was hurdling that transition. So
Right,
that was
right.
difficult to overcome.
Yeah, I think most people have to realize that imposter syndrome. Who's going to buy into this? Am I being authentic? Who is this really me? And I think at the end of the day, you, me, everybody, you have to own it. You have to realize this is my passion. This is my business. I'm going to make it work, hell or high water. Just watch me. And
Yeah.
and that confidence will help instill business from others, I think.
Agreed. One way that helped me transition out of that is I found TikTok, which people are probably going, what? But I committed to getting on TikTok every day and putting up a video last year. And I had one blow up and which was fantastic. And I've actually gotten some great business off of TikTok. And
Amazing. What's
so
your channel for TikTok?
it's Grundei Coaching. And what I learned from that is that consistency, which we haven't mentioned as a business owner, which is important, that consistency, showing up every day, showing up to that networking event again, and then again, showing up to social media every day, creating that brand identity, if you will, is so important, and it will pay back, and takes practice. And you might just suck the first, 20, 50, 60 videos that you do, and that's okay, because they're going to get better and better and better and better and better. So
Yeah.
I would say that was a big defining.
Consistency, yeah, really important. And what's next for you, Meredith? Where do you want to be in a year or two from now?
A year or two from now, that's a really good question. I want to double my business. I want to be working with more organizations on how to get people communicating and presenting in a more dynamic way that incorporates story, no matter how dry you think your presentation is.
Right. Well, thank you. Let's talk about some final words of wisdom for others.
Words of wisdom. I feel like we've said a lot, so I'll have fun. Like that would be my first word of wisdom, is the word fun, capital F-U-N, all caps, fun. Yeah. Find the joy in your business If it's not bringing you joy, then I feel that that's a place where hiring a coach might be helpful, right? There's a lot of coaches. There's very good coaches out there that can help you with that transition. If you're someone leaving corporate America and you're thinking about being an entrepreneur, find a really one. And people, you can reach out to me and Jared. I'm sure you know of a few as well, but there's some really incredible people out there. The Akimbo platform is a terrific one to go to if you're new and curious and don't have a lot of money to spend. I can name a bunch of coaches that I think would be great. So that's one. Find a coach if you don't know what you're doing, or you're curious, or you're not finding the joy in it. Find a sense of play. Be playful, be creative, find ways to entertain yourself, and be consistent. Smile, drink water.
Very important. And go for walks in the forest too. Meridith, how can somebody get in touch with you, please?
They can find me on my website at Grundei Coaching. That's spelled Grun as in Nancy, D as in dog, eicoaching.com. You can find me on LinkedIn under my profile, Meridith Grundei. You can find me on TikTok at Grundei Coaching. You can find me on Instagram at Meridith Grundei Coaching. And you can just Google me. Google me.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much. So I'd like to thank you, Meridith Grundei of Grundei Coaching, for joining us and sharing some entrepreneur wisdom on Talk to the Fedora. We hope that this segment has provided some wisdom for you to grow your small business. So please subscribe to the eSAX YouTube channel and be sure to check out the hundreds of other videos we have for great entrepreneurial content. Meridith, thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, thank you for having me, Jared. This was really lovely. I appreciate you.
Thank you.